question, Ted. I can't believe y'all didn't like my bum rush either, even though you know you're going to use that today. You're going to tell somebody that. Anyway, we're in week 4 of this series called AKA Christian. We're actually going to be riding this all the way into Easter. But today I want to kind of start going to a different level with this. So if you found yourself already stretched a little bit in the first few weeks, maybe even a little bit offended, just hang on because it's going to get really exciting over the next few weeks. But as we kind of finish this first phrase, I just want to kind of catch you up a little bit, maybe if you're coming in the middle, and take you forward a little bit. But what we've been talking about is how Jesus actually never referred to any of his followers as Christians, not once. That came much, much later. And unfortunately, over time, we've kind of settled for that as a title and kind of made it whatever we want it to mean. And it's easy to settle for Christian because that's what you can do. You can assign whatever you want to Christian, make it mean whatever you want it to mean. And it's not really even defined in the Bible, in Scriptures. It's only used, remember, 3 times. And every time that the Bible used the word Christian, it was derogatory. It was used from outsiders to try to describe this new strange group of people that were followers of Jesus. But Jesus actually used a different word, right? Jesus actually gave his followers a label, and they took it so seriously. They took what he called them so seriously that it's interesting. If you were to go visit the city of Rome today, and maybe you have, but if you were to go, on top of just about every single building everywhere, look at these pictures. You see crosses. This is modern day Rome, just everywhere, just crosses. And there are even crosses on the emperor's gate, the slave gate at the Colosseum, where they used to torture and kill Christians, now has crosses everywhere. And before you fast forward too quickly into history, because I know you're kind of like, well, it's Rome, that's where the Pope lives, right? So you kind of expect there to be, they have to have crosses there, right? So I want you to think back with me for just a second, because if you could go back to just a few years after Jesus was on the scene, like AD 64, 65, Nero, if you study him in history, he has just burned down the entire city of Rome. And so he needs a scapegoat. And he decides he's going to blame it on this new Jewish knockoff cult of people that everybody's calling Christians. So he blames the Christians, and he sends his henchmen and road warriors all throughout the city. They round up all the Christians they can find to actually take them and kill them and burn them. And he actually had this thing, I don't know if you studied, called Nero's Circus, which wasn't a circus at all. It was basically an arena where he made sport, game, out of torturing and mauling and killing Christians. So imagine if you could go back. Somehow we could hop a time machine and go back in the middle of all of this. And we went to the outside of the city of Rome, maybe out somewhere where there's a farm. And behind the farmhouse, there's a barn. And we could go in this barn, and in this barn you might find a couple of small families just kind of huddling in there, hiding because they fled the city of Rome together. And they know, with everything that's going on, they're never going to be able to go back to the city of Rome again. They've lost everything they've had. There's a bounty on their head. And if they're discovered as Christians, someone could actually be paid to take them back to the city of Rome, back to Nero, and they would be persecuted and eventually put to death in probably a pretty dramatic way. But we find this family, we sit down with them, and children are crying, right? They don't know what to do. Well, and we ask them this question, okay? Based on what we just saw there, we would say, did you know that if you could fast forward to our time, like 300 years even into the future, not even our time, but the city of Rome eventually is going to be covered with crosses. And we're not talking about the crosses that you're used to seeing. These crosses are going to be fixed to everything imaginable, from buildings to walls, highway signs. They're going to be everywhere. And they're not going to represent crucifixion. They're not going to represent torture. These crosses are going to represent one Jewish carpenter who was crucified, the very man that you worship, Jesus Christ. I mean, can you imagine if we were to tell that group of people then what we know now, like how they would respond? They'd say, you're nuts. You're absolutely crazy. That's never going to happen, right? You're insane. Rome is forever. Yeah, we believe in Jesus, the Messiah, right? We believe in Jesus, the carpenter, and we believe he's our Savior. But this movement, it's just a small movement. That's why we're running. We're only a few people, and there's no way that the Rome, no way in the world that they're ever going to turn around to this little fledgling movement of Jesus followers. And yet, if you were to go just 300 years into the future from that time, which in the course of history, 300 years is really not that long of a time, there are crosses everywhere in the city of Rome and around the world. How did that happen? From this little small fledgling group of people that were afraid. Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen because those followers settled for being Christian. It happened because these Jesus followers decided not to lower themselves to just some name, some identity, and be Christians. It happened because the follower of Jesus embraced what Jesus actually taught, what Jesus actually modeled, with such devotion that they took seriously the brand that he gave them. And listen, over time, you can't argue with this, regardless of big questions you might have, and those are legit, but you can't argue with the fact that over time, they changed the world. The world in which we live in today is a reflection of that. So it's like, I think about that, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what am I doing then? Wow. And why would we settle then? Why would we settle for Christian, which we can't even really define, when Jesus gives us such specific instructions and directions? So I want to read a portion today. I actually want to look at the speech that got this whole thing started, right? This was the speech that was the beginning of the movement, and this was early on in Jesus' ministry. And you've probably heard these words before, but I kind of want to look at it in a different context. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, when Jesus first gave this speech, were out gathered on. He was up on a hillside, and Jesus kind of realizes, all right, this is the moment to lay the groundwork. This is the beginning of something huge, something big. This is the beginning of the change that I came to put into motion. I'm going to introduce this group of people to a brand new worldview, to a brand new ethic and habits and behaviors that are going to turn the world upside down. Like, this is the moment, right? You ready for this revolutionary speech and that changed everything? I mean, this is the reason you and I are actually sitting here today. What Jesus did right here. It's in Matthew chapter 5. Here's where it all began, all right? So one day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. And I can just feel like the energy in the room right now. You guys are ready, right? We're going to read this revolutionary, world-changing, just shut down the Roman Empire kind of speech that Jesus gave. Here's what he started with. Verse 3, God blesses those who are poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So there you go. Poor in spirit. And then it gets even stronger. Verse 4, God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Yeah, it's kind of what I expect. That's probably what they were doing too when Jesus was saying this. It's kind of like, really? Are you from around here? I mean, you know what's going on in the world, Jesus? That's all you guys says. No, not more. Verse 5, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the earth. Like, humble. Wait a minute. Do you know anything about what's going on in Rome, Jesus? It's like, you realize what we're up against. Do you know we haven't had our freedom in decades? Where do you think humbleness and mourning is going to get us? God blesses the humble. They're going to inherit the earth. No, I mean, we can't even get into inherit our own land, much less the earth. We can't even control our own nation, Jesus. Humble. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. Okay, sorry. Jesus, I got a quick question. This is good. But work for peace? Wait a minute. I mean, do you really think we're going to be able to retake our land, to reestablish our nation, and be a people again by working for peace? This is not going to happen. You know what happens to people who try to make peace with the Roman Empire? They're swallowed up. They evaporate. They're no more. They're never to be heard from again, right? They just become one more of this big tax-paying horde to the emperor. What kind of movement? I'm sure they're starting to think, what kind of movement, what have we got ourselves into here? What have we signed up for? Jesus goes on, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you're my followers. And then get this, he says, be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Yeah, so the crowd's exactly like you at this point, I'm sure. Just like, what? Maybe he'll do a miracle or something, because this isn't really going anywhere. This is not what I was hoping to get on board with today. Really, this is the start of something new. So Jesus, all right, let me see, before you go on, let me make sure I'm hearing you right, because maybe it's me. But let me do a quick review. All right, look at this. So we are poor, sad, humble, hungry, merciful, pure, peaceful, persecuted, insulted people wait for a reward in heaven. Poor, sad, humble, hungry, merciful, pure, peaceful, persecuted, insulted people waiting for a reward in heaven. Is that who it is? Is that it? Okay, and you think this is going to go somewhere. To which Jesus may have just kind of smiled and chuckled a little bit, and we don't know what kind of future Jesus exactly knew, but I tell you what did happen. 300 years later, the message of Jesus was everywhere in the known world, everywhere. And nobody 300 years later was worshiping Roman gods anymore. So Jesus kind of backs up and realizes, okay, I don't know, he might be thinking, you might not remember all that right away. It may take you some time, but let me give you 2 word pictures, he said. Let me give you 2 word pictures to tell you who you are. Yeah, you're all of that, but let me put this in practical terms. And his next phrase was this, verse 13, he says, you are the salt of the earth. That's who you are. You're the salt of the earth. Now, everybody's in Jesus' day heard salt, and they thought something probably different than us. They knew of salt as a preservative. Because, right, they didn't have, like, freezers and refrigerators to keep their stuff fresh, right? So salt was how they preserved everything. And what's a preservative? All right, you need to learn something in church today, so this may be the only thing you remember, but I'm going to teach you something, all right? Preservatives is a substance added to food, right, to keep it from decomposing. Without a preservative, things get funky. Any substance that without a preservative decomposed, and things would rot, and things would stink. So here's what Jesus was saying. You are the preservative. You're the preservative of the earth. You are the preservative. If you lose your influence, if you just shirk back, the earth rots. I mean, if you lose your influence, culture starts to stink. If you don't have any influence, things are going to go in a very, very, very negative way. Now the society that he was speaking into here was a world where might made right? It wasn't about influence so much. If you wanted to know what the right thing was to do, you looked to the people with the biggest army. You looked to the people with the most swords and the most spears and knew how to use them. That's how right was determined. Moral issues weren't really moral issues. Ethical issues weren't really ethical issues. It was who had the most might, who has the most power. In this society, women had 0 rights. Okay, we've come a long way, but back then they were property. And children had even fewer rights than that. Things like mercy and compassion, these things Jesus was talking about, generosity, they were not virtues. Nobody looked up to people like that. They were weaknesses. It was a world that you and I really have a hard time imagining. The only way you could imagine is maybe if you were to visit another country in our world where they're still operating in some of those kind of worldviews. But what we can't really fully appreciate, I think, especially as Americans, is this, that much of what we assume is just common human decency is not common. Okay, it's something we learned. It's not human nature. This came from somewhere. Something taught us how to be good humans. What we consider is typically how Americans are, or what we hope to be, is not how Americans are. It's how Americans learn to be. Okay? We still reflect, get this, we still reflect these fundamental values that Jesus taught that eventually went all the way around the world and transformed cultures everywhere. Whether you're a Jesus follower or not, just understand, okay, it's not human nature to act in these ways, but we look up to people with these virtues, right? Because we can't imagine, honestly, that women would be viewed inherently any less than a man, right? And obviously there were times in this country where that was the case, and yet there was something that even then, we just kind of intuitively knew something's not right about that, and we changed it. And intuitively, we know that a person should never have ownership of another person. We just know that, even though we've struggled with that in our history. But we just know there's something wrong about that. And eventually our national conscience catches up with the reality of teachings like that and truths like that. We know that children are precious, right? But why do we think children are precious? Where does that idea even come from? Because there was a time where they didn't. When other cultures, even in our day, in some places in the world today, they don't think children are precious. Why do we think that when people are generous, like when you see someone giving, when you see someone leading, and especially what we're going through right now, when you see people going out of their way to help someone else, there's something inspiring about that, isn't there? There's something you're drawn to about that when they give of themselves to help people in need. Why do we say that's good instead of weak? Why do we think compassion is good instead of weak? Why do we think that mercy, why do we admire that? Why do we stop and celebrate someone who risks their life to run into a fire, to run into danger, or risk their income for the sake of someone in need? Why do we think things like that are good? Why are we attracted to that? It's not human nature. I believe it's the reflection of a worldview that says there's one creator God, and eventually you're going to give you an account of your life, whether you lived for yourself or you lived bigger than yourself. And that God loves everybody. Everyone you ever are eyeball to eyeball with, God loves and cares about. Red, yellow, black, and white. They're all precious in His sight, right? Male, female, children, whether you even believe in God, whether you're a follower of Jesus, there's an underlying belief system that we all live into and are attracted to that ultimately came from ancient Judaism and exploded through the teachings of Jesus. That's why we think this way. And just consider how much of this would have been lost to history, how different society might have even been for us today had those first century disciples not grabbed onto this, stayed sheltered, stayed scared, and not believed it, not lived it out. Been totally different. And Jesus said, look, okay, right now you have no political standing. You have no financial standing. You don't have a grip. Nobody's even paying attention to you. But you, he said to that crowd gathered that day, he said, but you are the salt of the earth. You are the last stand. You are the preservative. Without you, the earth rots. And you think it's bad now, you give up, you give in to the current, you just kind of go along with it, you just kind of put your head in the sand, and you'll see how bad things can really get. And I just don't think we can fully appreciate this, but we benefit from it every single day, from this worldview that says everybody, all people have value. That men, women, children are somehow made in the image of God, and that is not intuitive. Let's face it, okay, we fight things like human trafficking, and we fight things, we hear about slavery in other countries. We hear about the way children are used and traded, and we think, how in the world could anybody treat someone like that? What kind of person could get to that mindset where they think that's okay? And yet it's all around us, in our own city, in our own community, in our own backyards, in our own schools. It's simple. They don't see the world the way that you and I see it. And the reason they don't see the world the way you see it is because you've been taught to see the world the way you see it. Somehow through Jesus, we learned that God actually loves us, that we actually have value. And if He loves you and He loves me, suddenly I have value and I have worth, and I better be careful about how I treat you. You better be careful about how you treat me. And so when Jesus gathers His disciples, and he says, by this one thing, everybody's going to know whether you're real or not. This is the one thing that'll tell people that you're mine, right? How you love, how you treat, how you appreciate, how you care for one another. Get that right, everything else will fall into place. But by this one thing, and Jesus said, this is new, this is different. And if you'll allow it to, this thing will take hold. You are the salt. You are the preservatives. You are the influencers of the earth. You are. And not only that, he said this second thing. He said, you're the light of the world. To which, okay, but you're like me. This is where I really kind of want to push back, if I'm being honest. Even as a pastor, sometimes I'm kind of like, I don't want to be the light of the world. That's a lot of pressure. I just want to be a Christian. I want to know things are good with me and God, and I'm going to heaven when I die. That's what I want a lot of days. Just leave me alone. I don't want to be salt. I don't want to be light. I prayed the magic prayer, and I just want to go back and raise my family and know that we're all going to heaven when we die. I'll fly away one day. That's where I want to be. Jesus said, no, I don't think I taught you that. You didn't get that from me. You're the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And you know what's really strange about this? Just as a side note, you know how big the world was to that group of people that were gathered listening to Jesus that day? I mean, it was really, really small. Most of these people didn't travel more than like 15 miles. That's not even as far as downtown Kansas City is from there. That was the world they knew. That was it. That was the world. They didn't even know about all these other continents and this whole globe that we kind of know of now that hadn't even been discovered. This was an entire planet of other lands they didn't know about. Now, today has churches and Jesus followers on all of them. But he was serious. You're the light of the world, and you don't even know anything about it. You're the light of the world, he said, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. And if you've ever seen, or maybe you've been to this part of the world, you know that it's kind of flat and hilly in places. You know, it's kind of just barren out there. There's really no trees. There's a lot of shrubs. But they built towns on hills, on the sides of hills, and they built them out of like white limestone, pretty beautiful, and you could see them for miles and miles and miles. And the sun would reflect off of them in the middle of the day, and at night, you know, they'd light up their oil lamps where you could see them. And Jesus said, just like those cities, just like those things that you're aware of on the sides of those hills that you can't miss, that's what you are. It's what you are. You don't have to choose to be this. You are. You're getting noticed. You have influence. You are like a strategically placed city. That's why you're the light of the world. You've been strategically placed, to which, again, I know you want to push back. Like, no, I haven't been strategically placed. This is an accident. I didn't even want to be here, right? I'm not. So I was transferred here from another state or something. I didn't even really want to be here. And once I got here, I lost my job, and now I'm just stuck here, you know, dreaming of the beach and something somewhere, not all this winter junk. And I'm not strategically placed. I'm like a misfit. I just want to go back home. Right? Jesus said, no, it might seem random to you, but you're strategically placed. You're light. No, I'm not. I was just dating this guy, right? And he said, let's move to the Midwest, and I had stars in my eyes, and we moved here, and then he dumped me for his coworker or something, and now I'm stuck, and I don't even want to be here. I'm not strategic. I'm just trying to save up enough money to move back home. Jesus said, no, if you're my follower, if you're mine, it may seem random to you, but you are strategically placed, at least for this time, at least for this season. You're where I want you to be. And Jesus said, if you're my follower, you're light. He said this, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. That's you, he says, okay? In the same way a city is placed on a hill, in the same way a light's placed on a stand, he says, let your good deeds shine out for all to see. And then here's how I think, especially as church folk, here's how we read the next part, all right? Let your good deeds shine out for all to see, that they may see your church attendance and say, well, dang, he's a good Christian, right? Woo, look at him. I'm going to heaven, right? Leave me alone. I don't want to be a light. I don't want to be a salt. Can you be a salt or just salt? I don't want to be that. I just want to be a Christian because I don't even know what that is. Except my mama told me I got some kind of idea, right? But I'm good. I'm going to heaven. Me and God, we're great. That's how we read this. But listen to what Jesus says to this group of people this group of people never went anywhere and they didn't have anything. But he told them, in the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see so everyone will praise your heavenly Father. And now, don't get too super spiritual on me because this is so powerful. Do you know what he's really saying? He's saying, if you want to live your life in such a way that when people see what you do, the way you live it, they don't just go, oh, he's such a nice guy, right? And they're so nice. Those people are so nice. They see your good deeds and they say, no, are you kidding me? Who does that, right? We're supposed to be stingy. Right? I got to look out for me. Nobody gives of themselves in that way. Who's that generous? Who is that nice? Aren't they church people? Which kind of gives me the creeps a little bit sometimes. But wait a minute. They're the kindest, most generous, most outgoing, selfless people. I work for this guy and he's like a Christian, which kind of freaks me out. But I don't know what's up with him because it's just different. He always gives people second chances and he's always giving people the benefit of the doubt. And he has these really high standards, but he's like encouraging about it. And I don't know what's up. Jesus said, I want your good deeds to be extraordinary. I want you to surprise people with the way you love. I want them to be so extraordinary that people begin to connect the dots between the way they see you living your life and your Father in heaven. Help people make that connection, and it has so much less with what you say than it does with what you do. And some of you are great at this. Others of you, maybe you're just happy to be going to heaven when you die, hopefully, but you're a Christian. And Jesus said, I never once called you a Christian. I'm telling you who you are. Here's who you are. You're salt and you're light. You have influence. And these first century disciples, they lived their lives in such a way that even the pagan Roman Greek community began to connect the dots in the way they saw them live in their lives. They were under a tremendous amount of stress and hard life as well, and they used that as an opportunity, right? And in just a matter of just a few hundred years, The world literally turned upside down, not because of good preaching, not because of great worship, not because of tasty donuts or anything, but because of the way people live their lives, powerful living. Followers of Jesus who took seriously this teaching to be salt, to be light, to be an influence. And here's the important thing they both share in common, okay? Salt and light, neither one of them influence things because of their power. They change things through influence. They just are, right? That's what they do. That's who they are. That's their nature. They don't flex a lot of muscle. So here's what I think Jesus would say to us, okay? Don't just settle for being Christian. Because what is that anyway? It's whatever you want it to be. Be salt, he said. Be light. Be an influencer. Like just in your own circle of influence, you have a lot of sway. People are he's like, just be irritating enough, just enough to get attention to where people pay attention because you live a different kind of life. But not in this judgy way, but in a way that makes people think like, wow, I'm missing something. Be a preserver and be a light through your influence that points the way. Now, as we kind of wrap this up today, I know when I preach on this kind of stuff, and this is kind of, for some of you, a well-known passage, I know it can land all kind of preachy, and I get a little worked up. But it can be not all that practical once you step out of these four walls and go about your life. That's the kind of teaching, this kind of thing is so familiar. And I understand that, but let me just kind of turn it around, because the way to truly understand, I think, the significance, the practical significance of this kind of thing is to think about your story. Okay? The only reason, if you are a Christian, if you're a Jesus follower, a disciple, whatever you want to call yourself, okay? And I realize now, after like 3 or 4 weeks of this, some of y'all are afraid to use the word Christian. And I guess that's all right. I'm sorry I took that away from you. We'll get past Easter and you can start using it again and it'll be great. But whatever you are, okay, here's the deal. If you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, here's what I do know about you, even though I don't know your story. You're a follower of Jesus because somebody somewhere had influence in your life. You're here today, hopefully not because you were forced to, because you have to, because somebody had influence in your life that changed the way you think, that changed the way you act, changed the way you see the world. Someone had influence on you, and they didn't even necessarily mean to be. They just were, right? In fact, they maybe didn't even know they were being an influence, and they didn't feel like they were strategically placed in your life. It wasn't like, hey, I'm a city on a hill at Hy-Vee, right? I'm a city on a hill every time I go into Target, Home Depot, in the office. No, they weren't thinking that. They were just trying to be what they thought they should be. And you noticed something caught your attention. Something caused you to want to take a step towards that. Lean in. They weren't trying to be a city on a hill in the neighborhood, but you know what? Some of you think about the fact maybe somebody bought a house next to you or down the street that was going to for sale for a long time. Next thing you know, there's these crazy neighbors doing some weird stuff, and it's like, oh man, they're going to wreck the party. They're Christian, they're church folk. I hope nobody invites them over to the barbecue, because that's going to be a huge buzzkill, right? It's going to be weird. And then you got to know them, and now you're a follower of Jesus. That's some of your story. And here's what you would say about them. You'd say, you know what? I feel like that's providential. I feel like God did that. Right? I mean, I feel like God put them next to us. But they didn't feel that way. That was just a house they liked. That was just a house they bought. And then they had influence, because that's just who they were. That's who they are. That's how this works. Some of you, you're so grateful for the man or the woman that God brought into your husband or your wife's life, because maybe you prayed and prayed and prayed for them, and you said, God, my husband's not going to listen to me anymore. My wife, maybe she'll listen to someone else. And God answered your prayer, and God brought someone into their life. God intersected their paths with someone else that helped reorient their faith or reorient them toward the things of God. And that person, whoever that person is, they didn't think of themselves as salt. He or she didn't think of themselves as light. Some of you are grateful for the people that had influence on your children in a positive way. And if you were to sit down with those people, they didn't think of themselves as being strategically placed. God didn't send them a memo and say, hey, go to this place and do this. But it was kind of like that from your perspective, wasn't it? It's like God did something. You see those as providential relationships. God brought them along just at the right time. God brought her along just at the right time. Those neighbors into my life. God brought that individual, right? That boss. I just feel like God put him in my life at the right time, right? Why? Because from our perspective as receivers, it seems so providential. But those men and women, they weren't thinking that. They were just being salt. They were just being light. They were just being who they were. And now you know your Heavenly Father. And now you have a different perspective on eternity. And you have an assurance of that relationship. And now you see the world maybe completely differently. So if you're struggling with this, and maybe the thoughts even crossed your mind this morning, you know, I don't have any influence. I have no influence. I have zero influence. I don't know anybody of importance. Nobody listens to me. I want you to listen if that was your thought, if that was going through your mind this morning. This is what you need to understand, okay? It's what Jesus told us. Salt always preserves. It's not all on you. Salt always preserves. Light always shows the way. It's just their nature. And both always have influence. And you are salt, and you are light. You are. You just are. Salt works even when we can't see it working, right? And light works even when you don't know it's working. Salt always preserves, light's always showing the way. And you say, well, Dennis, you know where I work, we can't really talk about religious things. They kind of frown on that, so I don't think I can be salt. I don't think I can be light in my environment. No, salt always preserves, light always shows the way. And if you're a Jesus follower, Jesus would look at you and say today, okay, you're the salt of that environment. You are the light of that world. Let your good deeds shine in such a way that people begin to connect the dots between the way they see you live in your life, between your story and the fact that you're a follower of me. Let your life do the talking, even if you can't. And you may have no idea who's looking back at that interaction and saying, you know what? You know, there's this guy in my office, there's this woman in my office, and I found out they're Christians, and this is how they behaved, and it was refreshingly different, and this is how they manage things. And I never forgot that, right? I just kind of knew in my heart I wanted to be like that. I never told them, but maybe I was proud. I never told them because it was going to be disruptive. I never told them, but you know what? I never forgot them either. You see, wherever you are, Jesus says be salt. Wherever you are, he says be light. And salt always preserves. Light always points the way. We're always influencing. We are always influencing. And we have no idea who's around us, who's on the verge of a breakthrough, of a next step, simply because of our influence. And we may never know the end of their story. We may never know how our interaction with them impacted them. But here's one thing you can rest assured of, okay? You can know this. Salt always preserves. Light always shines the way, points the way forward. Get this. Influence is not leveraged by what you say. It's proven by what you do. So shut up and do something, right? I got in trouble with somebody this week because I said shut up in church a few weeks back. And it's like parents, right? They take liberty with that. Well, Dennis said it, so. But I wanted to make my point, so I apologize. But maybe that'll stick. Shut up and do something. Don't just settle for Christian. Jesus said, you're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. And here's what we know. When you're salt and when you're the light, it has the potential to change things. That's what it does. It just does every time. So let's not settle for just Christian. Let's ask God how to make us more effective salt. How can we be a more effective light in my own circle of influence? And as God answers that prayer, who knows what God might do in our families, in our communities, in our city, in our country, especially during a season like we're going through right now. What an opportunity to be salt and light. Let me pray for you. God, I do thank you for the opportunity that you give us to live a bigger story. And it certainly points everything to you. But God, I just thank you for the ways that it actually makes me feel better about me. I thank you that I can know by following you, you just make life better and you make me better at life. And God, I thank you for that. I just pray that you would, as we leave here today, as we go back into a pretty unsettled environment, unsettled world right now, that you would help us to find really, really practical opportunities to do this. Maybe more now than even in times past, to be an influencer, to be salt, to be light. God, help us to do that in just real practical ways, and that our story might point to something bigger than just us. We thank you and pray for that in Jesus' name. Amen.